Welcome, Divine. Welcome. How are you guys doing? No, really. How are you? I went to pull this spread to check in on the energy because, I had marked the last readings up until the 7th, and then I went back and I said, no, this energy, this motion is going to take it out to at least the 11th, and that's for those who are kind of spearheading ahead. Of course, it goes out throughout the month as many come into that energy, but those within that front line spacing. And I decided to go in today and just check in. And as I went to check in, I said, well, I'll check in and then I'll come on and I'll do the clarifiers with you guys. But I don't even need any clarifiers because my check-in actually is beginning. Now, this is the spread that I generally do when I do personals and reading into personal situations. So this is the DM, the DF, the DM, the DF, the DM, the DF. And then when I do personals, I generally go on into a future position. So this goes into what got us to the motion that's being worked on today, that is the overall of the present to future position for each one. So this came out, and it came out with, this is the motion that if you go back and you look at the readings, this is where the Divine Masculine, the overall motion that the Divine Masculine was attempting to get to, which is wonderful, which is also the beginning motion that the Divine Feminine was working on. So this is a beautiful example of the mirror, because it's like that suffering in silence is where the Divine Masculine energy starts off. And it's like, whoa, that's where the Divine Feminine started working on within the motion. This is how you can see how this thing is really playing out real time. And it's like, okay, and then it was the Divine Masculine working overall to get to that motion. Well, here we are in the beginning, letting we know that the Divine Masculine has arrived at that motion. So, I love it when the music goes up in octane. That was really loud too. So, Divine Masculine energy is starting out in the suffering in silence. And the reason why I have them beside each other, because you recognize in this season of union and justice, there is an alignment that takes place. So you can recognize that many of the placements of the Divine Masculine energy you have within you, and the Divine Feminine energy, vice versa, the same thing. Because essentially it's the energy in both that you're balancing within yourself and then aligning with your partner. Yeah, so as we're looking at this, the Divine Masculine energy starts out in that suffering in silence. And we know that this is the motion that we are at, that we are moving from. And we're moving from this motion into the change. So we know what that is. It's I'm living a life outside of what I truly desire. I have my eyes and sights on this, but I'm suffering in silence, living opposite of what my true desires are in many ways. I'm showing up this way, but I'm not really fulfilled this way. I'm acting like I'm okay this way, but I'm really not okay this way. I'm doing all of this, but it's not really leading to my intent that I set out. So this is the motion, and we went into much detail in our last reading with the suffering in silence. Well, this is the motion that the Divine Masculine energy is beginning in, and this is the motion that the Divine Feminine energy was conquering within the reading. So it's happening. That mirror is effective. Those energies are intertwining, and it is that ascending is taking place. So it's okay. Well, what is the motion that is happening within the change of the Divine Masculine energy with that suffering in silence? So it's like the Divine Masculine is moving on. That's the onside, moving on. And right here with the Divine Feminine and the Divine Masculine, both of them are 5-5. And that's that change and realignment. So they're both in that 5 position of change. So it goes over and it's like, well, what is that? So the change within the divine masculine energy that's taking place, it comes up with that obstacles and challenges. So moving from that suffering and silence position to the obstacles and challenge. And when you look at this card within the Holland deck, many of you guys liked it. So I said, okay, let's pull this out. And I like it too because it goes out of the traditional tarot, and you really just look within the card and really get a lot of meanings. But this one overall does mean within the Holland that stepping back and seeing what led to this position. And in order to be able to move forward and getting out of the victim mode, that's exactly the meaning of this card within the Holland. And some of the meanings within it, because there's even more, of course. But this is the perfect position to look in and see that this is where the divine masculine energy is, because the divine masculine energy is looking at the moves that I'm making. Yeah, looking at the moves that I'm making, stepping back and seeing what creates this separation and break in my life, what creates me living in that silence, that double life, what's been holding me back, what's been my obstacle and challenge, really doing that reflective instead of going with emotions and just living life. So that's what we talked about, that awakening motion to be able to see is what the divine masculine energy had moved up to. And this is a reflection of showing, oh my goodness, the divine masculine energy is able to see, because in order to actually do that reflection and see what led to a certain point, you have to be able to see your moves that you're making. So the divine masculine energy is looking behind the veil of their own life and seeing what led to the obstacles and the challenge. They're taking that step back, and they're doing this so they can actually take the step forward. So it's step back so I can actually take the step forward is what we have going on with the divine masculine energy. And then we go down into, well, what does this lead into? Why are we doing these motions? And then of course you get that new beginnings for the divine masculine energy. And that new beginnings is right here. You can see that stepping into conquering the world, that power, going into that spiritual nature of seeing things. It's just it's a beautiful motion that we see that is happening, and we'll go into that even a little bit more, but we want to catch up with the divine feminine so you can actually see this side by side as to what's happening even more. So we have right beside these energies, neck and neck, is the divine feminine energy, and it's like, whoa, the divine feminine energy comes up with temptation. And it's like, temptation, what is that about? And you know, in the traditional tarot, this is considered that devil card, and it's like, well, why is this coming up with the divine feminine? But when you start to look at this within the Holland looks at it completely differently, in a way that it is the same view, but it really breaks it down, you know, and it just really shows the motion of the divine feminine energy. And it's too much emphasis on the material and physical world, and knowing that the divine feminine energy has that divine nature and that they're connected to that divine nature, but having a tendency to turn away from it. And you can actually see the two faces where the face is just kind of shifting. So turning away from the divine nature is also that turning away from self. Haven't we been talking about the divine feminine energy working on not turning away from self despite what is happening in life or people who come before or situations? So that is interesting that this is coming up and you can see it this way. And even like a hand up with a blocking of the light within the situation and to turn away. So it's like, well, okay, that's not really the divine feminine energy. Divine feminine energy is like, no, I embrace the light. That is me. It's like, what is this talking about? But when you go down and break down this card within Holland and where the temptation comes in, it's like whenever that divine feminine energy turns away from that divine nature, that divine feminine energy goes into that fear and that codependency that comes up. Literally, written, and also addiction that comes up with the divine feminine energy whenever there's a turn away from self and turn away from acknowledging the connection to the divine self of the divine feminine energy. So it's like, so what is this about? So starting out in this motion, and the change is happening in this motion. It's like, well, what is this about? Well, this is what the divine feminine energy is working on. The divine feminine energy is working on being steady and balanced, so that whenever something happens, that they don't go into that trigger to where they turn away from themselves or turn away from anything that they desire manifestation wise. But this is going deeper than that. It's going deeper than that, because it's like, even though something triggers me, I'm able to sit in it and see what's going on, but not abort mission. I'm getting abort what's going on, abort the idea of pressing forward to what I truly desire, not getting into that fear space, or not getting into that codependency of that, just really getting honed in on what I see in the physical. Really getting caught up on what the divine feminine is seeing around, and forgetting the spiritual nature of the journey and the divine feminine. But this goes in even deeper than that, because the change shows up. So this is how we know that the divine feminine is handling things, and this is such a beautiful change piece, is similar to the divine masculine energy that is at that place where they're able to step back and reflect and see everything, really have that clarity coming in and see things. The divine feminine energy moving in that motion of tackling right now, that point in which there's that, I'm getting that shifty, where it's kind of like, I'm really putting emphasis on the physical world, then I'm really putting emphasis on the spiritual world, but really being divided, but not actually getting to the point of saying that I am the embodiment of all of it, So I'm getting, not turning away from themselves in even the bigger picture motion. And this is why the change position that's coming up with the divine feminine, and this steadiness that the divine feminine is obtaining, is that there's a change in the financial and material changes of the divine feminine. And it's like, well, what are you talking about with that? Well, the divine feminine going in the motion that the divine feminine was going in before, that unsteadiness, whenever the divine feminine would be triggered by things and go into that fear and that codependency, and just really turning away from what they desire, just because of just the pain of it, because things are coming up and triggering them. They're feeling the way they felt before, things that we've talked about in Divine Manifest. I do another I separated, because I know some people just want to come in and they want to get their readings, and that's just where you are now, and I understand that. And then I go in and I identified it separate just for now. After we get through this union season, it's all going to combine within, but really separating it now for those who are in a position where they're ready to really just see the spiritual workings of this entire journey. But that comes out once a week on this channel too, if you subscribe. And thank you guys for those who subscribe and like. Now that came to my mind, that I wanted to put that out in the shares. I received a report and I was like, oh, wonderful. Thank you. That's beautiful. That the message is getting out. The word is getting out. And that's important, that we're all together in that. So I appreciate that greatly so. But going into the motion, we want to get back to this. We want to get back to the divine feminine. And what I was speaking of is that how those things start to come up and trigger is that I do have an additional, it's set up in a Generation Holds the Gold School that I did way before I decided I was coming to YouTube, but I'm transferring things over. But of course I picked the perfect time to transfer, and I tell myself that I am not affected by the planetary motions. But I think there was so much programming around Mercury retrograde that it just sticks. It's almost like I know the time is here sometimes, without even the awareness ahead of time. So there's a lot of swanky things going on, and I have gotten the email that there was trouble getting the download on accepting your neediness and identifying that within self. But also there's uploading in the same spacing is the really looking at that programming and relationships and releasing those survival templates, because ultimately that's what's happening. All of that's going to sort out. It's just swanky stuff. It's just swanky stuff. And when you think about it, and I want to get back to that within the retrograde, because this is a beautiful time, because what happens is it's almost like what's coming to me is the cha-cha slide. So it's like I'm getting a cha-cha slide and it just keeps coming up and it's just like cha-cha. But I'm getting, the main thing is now reverse. So that part of the cha-cha slide was now reverse is really what happens with the planetary motions for Mercury retrograde. And it's really love from the universe that says you're stuck in those motions and we're going to shake you up. Almost like taking the earth and just kind of shaking everything up a little bit. This is a big spiritual happenings time, because that shakeup is allowing things to align, realign into the spacing that it needs to go. So it's like, okay, we've been going into this motion for a while. Now reverse. And of course, when that time happens, things get a little haywire. And if you are a highly sensitive person, a lot of times what you're picking up on is the things that are taking place on the earth during these times, because it's a high spiritual time where things go down, things go down. And especially during this time of year, during justice and union season, because in order for justice and those unions to take place, then there has to be the alignment and placing for union. And sometimes it's not as pretty, and that's really what's happening with the twins. And it's like, well, why is it that this shakeup is happening on the earth and that realignment, so people can get in the motion and have those spiritual workings that are happening? Well, really to clear out a lot of the things that we have on earth that is preventing that alignment. And who's doing that? You guys, the twins. What do you think this is? The motion that the divine masculine energy is working. Love it when that music goes up an octane, so I hit something. So that motion that the divine masculine energy is taking right now, and you, the divine feminine energy, is taking right now, is really, you're sitting with that stuff that was creating these same cycle relationship patterns in yourself, and you are transmuting them by putting light on that situation, healing that situation up within yourself, becoming steady in it, looking at it in new perspective and new ways. And that's happening throughout the earth. You're doing that during these time periods. So a lot of stuff goes down and comes out during these times. And that's one of the beautiful points about being on the spiritual journey and understanding that a lot of times when these motions take place, we go into heightened psychic spiritual gifting awareness during this time. And that's really what's talked about a lot in Divine Manifest as well. But it's because we're aware that things are going down and you're being tapped in, you're being notified of so much. And when there's a heightened energy of so much happening, then it feels a little bit heavy. But understand that's your stuff happening. That's your stuff taking place. And sometimes things go a little haywire when the earth goes on reverse. But it is to be embraced to know that this is a time that things are going down heavy in the spiritual world behind scenes. And this is often the manifestations and the prayers and the affirmations that you put in place are really happening during these times. So you can expect during these times, like breaking out of this motion of suffering in silence and facing obstacles and challenges of the divine masculine. We speak about that in spiritual terms, but when you think about that in the physical world, that means a whole lot of crap can be going down, to really align that physically. So it's like that aligning within, and then the physical world has to then align to it. Also with the divine feminine energy. And this is the beautiful thing that's coming up. So the divine feminine energy is recognizing that, not turning away from themselves and actually sitting in those emotions and releasing those emotions to where it doesn't fear them or create that really, heavy codependency that we're getting with the counterpart and things of that sort, that it allows them to really balance out and steady themselves in ways that they hadn't been able to do before. and they're calling in more of their spiritual nature and their oneness of who they are. So not necessarily looking at all from the physical point of view that I'm getting, really looking at it more from the spiritual point of view. And they're recognizing that it is also affecting their financial and material changes. So it's almost like I'm going in instead of focusing on out. And now that I'm going in, it's starting to affect my out. Which is a beautiful thing that is happening. The same as the divine masculine. It's like, okay, so I'm not suffering in silence, I'm facing it, and now that I'm facing it, I'm actually starting to see ways to move forward. Bingo. The same with the divine feminine energy. Is like, oh shoot, and the finger that is, see, this card is so beautiful, and that's why you have those fives over there, because it's a beautiful change for both of them. That mirror is amazing. So you have the pinky is what's standing out to me, that goes into that indigo, and that's why you gotta love cards like this, and the detail and the artists and the masterminds behind it. Because if you have that intuitive center, you're going to draw to something. And the one that you draw to is going to be that message. And when we look at that and we go out and we see, okay, well, what is indigo? And that's that inner wisdom, that third chakra. So that's the finger. So it's like what we're saying. The change of the divine feminine is that the divine feminine is embracing that inner wisdom in handling things. That inner wisdom, and you can see neck and neck beside that. Here you can actually see the same color placement down that now the divine masculine is able to see within that indigo. So looking at that inner wisdom, being able to see how I've been moving, what I've been doing. Oh my gosh, did I do that? Oh my goodness, am I with that person? Oh my goodness, did I make that move? They're starting to actually use their inner wisdom and actually start to see the physical moves that they're making. But it's also creating, that inner place is creating the outer physical world. And you know, that's that flip gifting of the twins. So that inner placing is affecting that outer world. And so beautifully with the divine feminine energy, what we're getting is that it moves into power. And in that power, you want to see the combination of the two faces. But the two faces happen to be human and beast, which is so beautiful because it really just highlights that divine power where that divine feminine is coming into oneness and saying, okay, if I'm looking at this thing like a spiritual journey, then I'm going to have to use my spiritual stuff to deal with it. I can't say it's a spiritual journey and then handle it like it's a physical thing. When stuff pop off, I got to go in. I got to go into where? I got to go into the spiritual nature of it. That means there's no physical motions to it. I got to go in and I got to figure out what just popped off. I know what the physical world looks like, but let me see what popped off spiritually based on the physical world. Then you also have the divine masculine sitting neck and neck with it, which is just like, well, why am I suffering? Well, let me go in and figure out why I am suffering. And then starting to look at the fact of the moves that they have been making, and both of them are in that 5-5 change. So that lets us know that they're moving forward, and we know a confirmation of that because new beginnings, divine masculine, power, divine feminine. So the divine feminine energy is standing in that power, and I'm getting even a deeper level that the divine feminine energy is recognizing and standing in that power, that they're able to mix in their divine nature with the physical material. They're seeing more and more how you guys are able to do your mission. You're recognizing that, and what I'm getting is that your mission isn't toss all the physical. You're recognizing like that is the old of mission. It isn't the mission of tank everything in the physical world. This is the mission of bring everything in the spiritual world into the physical world. So it's not abandon the physical world for the spiritual. It is bring the spiritual in the physical. We are anchorers to the earth of what is within the heaven ways and ascension systems. So this is what the divine feminine is recognizing. So I don't have to give up this to have this, or have that to give up that. And they're starting to recognize that they have to just look at it differently. And it's starting to change their financial and material changes. It's starting to change. And they're starting to recognize that this does not have to be, I'm getting that this doesn't have to be a broke, busted, and disgusted journey. That is strong, but that is what's coming. It's like, this does not have to be a broke, busted, and disgusted journey. Like, I don't have to have these triggers and then go do something physically that leads me to a place where I'm not feeling okay about myself and I'm out of balance. And then I can actually combine these spiritual nature and concepts with the stuff that I have going on now, the stuff that I've already wanted to do, and I can bring my divineness within it, and it is what is going to prosper. And that is the power that I'm getting. And with the divine masculine energy, same difference. I do not have to hide. I do not have to run. I do not have to conceal what's really going on, even from myself. That's ridiculous. So I'm actually stepping back, looking at the stuff and recognizing I don't have to make the same cycle moves I've been making, or do the same stuff I've been doing if it's really not making me happy. If it's really not making me happy, why am I telling a tale to myself and others? I am actually seeing what I need to do now to move forward, because I'm able to recognize and move in that motion of no longer suffering in silence, but I'm vocal to myself. Okay? So, and being vocal to myself allows me to also sit in that truth with others. Beautiful. And it also creates a new beginning of a new self, because essentially what was being presented, that's that masking self. Okay? And then that's beautiful, because that new beginning on top of the world, walking into that spiritual nature, is just like the same thing next to it within the divine feminine, of both of those, no longer a one or the other facing, but a together. I am my divine nature. I am still my powerful, I'm getting powerful, badass woman that I created within my physical systems, and I combine it with my spiritual nature, and that is the power that's changing everything. Yeah, it's not a sacrifice. It's a gain. It's not a one or the other. That the divine journey that I'm getting, that the twin flames take, generally they start off strongly in one area, which is strongly in that business, financial come up area, and then gain that spiritual knowledge, or go into that spiritual world and knowledge, and then, you know, have to do that plight of gaining the other. But this journey leads you to both. Having that physical 3D world well-being, and that internal peace, harmony, spiritual insight, and well-being. You can't put a label of the divine on something that doesn't match the divine, you know? So what that means is that it's not a superficial thing. It's just that when you run into the divine, there should be a happiness, a joy, a peace, and a content and fulfillment to the life that they live. So it's really working to have it all. So it's generally a strongness in one end, and the divine journey is to balance it so they can have them both. Yeah. So it's really an abundant journey is what the twins actually take on, which is that physical and that spiritual world abundance. And it can include what you want it to include. But it does have to be in truth and in fulfillment to that person, because it has to produce that divine light to anchor in that love, and also be witness for other people to see, who would want to walk in truth and do all of the clearing of the stuff that you guys have done. This clearing and facing stuff, and learning the art of patience, and really sitting with yourself and seeing the truth of yourself, and then letting go and releasing stuff that doesn't serve you and aligning with the stuff that does. Who's gonna want to do that if the end of the story is the same? No way. The end of the story has to be big. It has to be shiny. It has to be amazing to sell this journey. All right, guys, the golden mission. The golden mission is union. Union within self, then union with others.